Okay, so welcome back to a very rare Kiss Information podcast episode. Tonight I'm joined with a fellow member of the wealthy expat community. I reached out to this guest because I heard that he got Saint Lucian citizenship, so hopefully this will be a very productive and very insightful conversation if you're looking to diversify your personal passport portfolio. Tonight I'm joined with Ray Maung. Ray, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So, as a starting point, I'd like to sort of go into your background a little bit because in this, I call it citizenship diversification, economic migration realm. Everyone has a different background. So what's your background? Are you a US citizen? Did you have any other passports growing up, or did you only get into passports at a later date?
So I am a US citizen. I was born only with a US passport. I was born here in the US. So I only got into this space probably, I would say, I only got interested in about 2022. In July is when I applied for my Saint Lucia passport, and I got it in January. And the reason for my continuing interest is actually I got married in August of 2023. So, yeah, August 23. So after I got my Saint Lucia passport, I got married. And then I applied for my wife at the end of the application was submitted in the end of September, and as of now recording this, which is the end of November, still haven't gotten the approval for it yet. So that's why I'm still interested in this space and especially keeping up with the Saint Lucia citizenship program as well as the other programs and whatnot that are available, because obviously, as you could imagine, having to wait, well, it's now 14 months for your wife to get her passport is a little bit long.
Well, it's very long, and in fact, and I hate to go down the number I'm about to say. It shouldn't, ruin your optimism by any means. But my previous guest, the episode isn't currently out yet. As of recording, it'll be out next week. But I recorded with a subscriber of mine, and he got Italian citizenship through descent. And it took him 7 years from actually sending in the first document to getting the passport in the mail in the United States. So citizenship and naturalization is best described by a phrase that I coined called bureaucracy manifest. They love bureaucracy. They love send us as many papers as possible. Let's hope Germany never introduces citizenship by investment, because that would be a whole other level of absolute bureaucratic hell. But just as we go on, so you had a US passport, a US citizen by birth, grew up in US. Okay, cool. Then you've got Saint Lucian citizenship. Did you got Saint Lucian citizenship through investment, right?
Yeah, through the donation option.
Okay, cool. And with that, when you applied for your wife to get it in September, did you also have to make another donation then, or because you had already naturalized technically in the country? Should she technically be entitled to it without need of another donation or investment?
So the way at least St. Lucian, I believe all the donation options, not only in the Caribbean, but I think pretty much around the world, the way it works is you only make the full payment when they approve you, which is way down the line. When you first start out, you only pay the application fee and the due diligence fee. I don't know if you pay all of it, but you only pay like a fraction up front for them, so that you show them that you're serious about the process. It's only after they do the long due diligence process that you actually put down the full amount. And as for my wife, so yeah, I was a St. Lucian citizen when we married. But the thing is, and I think this is true for a lot of the citizenship by investment programs, when you come through citizenship by investment, or in my case, donation, when you try to add a spouse or dependents on afterwards, you also have to pay another donation. It's usually reduced. Like in my wife's case, I think the total will be $40,000. Rather than at the time when I did the donation, it was $100,000. So it's not like, a normal situation where you can just add on spouse or dependents, for a very low fee. The only exception to that, I believe, and I know at least for Saint Lucia, and I think the other Caribbean programs are like this. When you have a child, a newborn, for Saint Lucia, to get them the citizenship, I believe it's $5,000, and there's some paperwork, of course.
Yeah, well, there's always paperwork. Paperwork is pretty much a guarantee at this rate, right? It's kind of like the one enemy I have in regards to citizenship. So I'd like another passport, but I don't want to go through the paperwork. So it's like, when I was applying for, me and my family were applying for our US green card. It's like I got to experience it then on a whole other level of just how much they go through and everything. Like, speaking to other people who've gone through any level of immigration process, it's always so much paperwork and bureaucracy, and I do understand it, but it's like when you're a well-intentioned person, you kind of don't really see the point, because you know who you are. So when they ask you all these questions, I understand why they're asking it, but then it's like, it's kind of weird, because you go, no, I'm definitely not that, and they should know, but naturally they've never met you. So I kind of do get it, but it's kind of something that I also wish they could maybe loosen down a little bit if you have like a cleaner record, or maybe if you already have another passport from a respected country that shows, okay, if this country accepted you, chances are, that you're probably a credible person. Now, Saint Lucia has, as with all CARICOM countries, has increased the price now. I believe Saint Lucia's 240,000 American. I believe currently in citizenship by investment, the cheapest options are both in the Pacific, being Vanuatu and now Nauru. What made you, at the time, go for Saint Lucia instead of maybe Grenada or Dominica, which I believe both of them at the time were the exact same price range?
The reason I went for Saint Lucia at the time was I was a single guy at the time, and basically the two choices I considered were in the Caribbean were Saint Lucia and Dominica, and I just heard that Dominica didn't have as good of a reputation as Saint Lucia, and so that's why I went with Saint Lucia, and that actually turned out to be the better decision, because since that time Dominica lost access, I believe, to the UK, and whereas Saint Lucia didn't. So the reputation of the program is important. So I do understand why these programs need to pass the paperwork and the due diligence. I didn't consider Vanuatu was also an option, but it was the same price then, so it made no sense to do that, because Vanuatu had even then didn't have the best reputation, and I think actually at the time Vanuatu was actually more expensive than Saint Lucia. So the only advantage to Vanuatu, I think at the time would have been faster. Like at that time, I believe you would get the passport in like a month or two. I think now Vanuatu takes at least 3 or 4 months. But I wasn't in a hurry back then. So I also considered all the other options like Portugal, Turkey. I'm glad I didn't do Portugal, because I would still be waiting for my citizenship, because that apparently takes 3 years. At least 3 years for the residency. Right now, most people I think are they've had to wait for their citizenship for I think 5 or 7 years, and actually because of that, that's also why Portugal recently changed the rules, so that the time between the time you get the passport actually now starts from when you apply rather than when you get the residency, because the residency is taking so long to get in Portugal.
Well, to be fair, like I'm pretty sure Portugal now, currently, or maybe like a few months ago, they established that they're going to be completely changing their whole immigration department. So the backlog must be unbelievable if they're literally changing the whole thing on a national level like that. I don't know why they would do that, like just so abruptly, where maybe they would change one department at a time. Okay, maybe they'd go, okay, we're going to upgrade immigration first, then we're going to upgrade the processing department, but no, they decide to upgrade it all at once, and it's now caused a huge backlog, I believe, and I don't remember the exact source for this, but I think they had a backlog of about 50,000 applicants just for residency, just for like an example would be the D7 or the D8 visa for non-Schengen citizens. So Portugal's a great country. Not the best sounding language in the world, but quite an easy language to learn. But the backlog of that is unbelievable. But like even in Europe still. And it's actually a miracle that the golden visa has survived as long as it has in the European Union. Same principle with Malta, Greece, and an unknown, a quite unknown country. Austria also has a citizenship by investment program, but that's in the tens of millions. And I believe Hungary is now introducing a golden visa sort of program where if you buy property for about, I don't remember the exact numbers, perhaps 800k, you'll get permanent residence.
It was 250.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. I thought it was 800k, but that might be in foreign or something. I'm not too sure, but it's actually a miracle that these European countries have maintained it, because I believe the European Union did take Malta to court over this, which is one of the main things that I disagree with them about. I am fond of the European Union, but not with their bureaucratic nonsense. Now, you said you got interested in this whole world in 2022, 2022 time. So before 2022, had you ever considered getting a second passport, or maybe living abroad? I appreciate you aren't currently living abroad, or maybe getting a second residency somewhere, or was it only after you got into this world where you really started getting interested in it?
The reason I got interested in it is because I had been living abroad in 2022. I'd been living abroad basically since 2015, and the real impetus was actually the pandemic, right? So, during the pandemic, the American passport ended up being fairly useless in terms of being able to go as a tourist visa. So that really got me thinking, okay, I need, if I want to be able to continue, traveling and living abroad, maybe I should invest in a second passport, have some diversification there. Because I learned in school, and also I do this for my income. I'm a big believer, obviously, in diversification, but it never really occurred to me, you need to be more diversified in just more than just your investments in, like, say, stocks. You also need to be diversified in terms of your passports, where your other assets are.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's very true. I think it's something that's quite overlooked. Now, yes, there is an argument to be made that it's not essential, to have multiple passports. Like, should everyone have 7 passports? Probably not. No. I mean, it's not going to impact everyone's daily life. Some people are very content with having one passport, living in their country of origin or birth. Some people like that lifestyle. Other people want the exact opposite lifestyle. I'm kind of more closer to the latter. In all honesty, where I want the opposite lifestyle, I want to be the foreigner. I grew up everywhere I went, I was the foreigner. So that's kind of that's kind of all I know. But there is a difference. However, I think you touched on a very good point. Is that COVID really did wake up a lot of people for it. I mean, a passport, and if I appreciate, I don't know exactly what's written in the US passport, but in, I believe, the UK passport, it is written, this passport allows unconditional entry into the United Kingdom. I'd imagine for the US there might be a similar thing written where this passport allows unconditional entry into United States and unincorporated territories. But I found that quite ironic, because if that's written in the, and no disrespect to the country, but if that's written in the Australian passport, they have to erase that after COVID, because they didn't even let their own citizens in, which is completely and utterly shocking. So I think you're right. COVID, I mean, for me it was a little bit after, because I was still fairly young at the time. I was still in high school and everything, but I think COVID really was a wake-up call for a lot of people who are in this world now that, okay, maybe we need to diversify our incomes, diversify our languages might be another good strategy, but relying on one passport, if you're from Canada, Australia, or New Zealand, that was evidence that you needed to get a second one real quick.
Yeah. And I would say, in terms of how many passports you need, I mean, obviously it depends on, your net worth and, if you can get any citizenships by descent. If you're not a wealthy individual going out and doing citizenship by investment or donation, I wouldn't recommend it. Obviously, if you can do it by descent, that's the preferred method. If you can spend time on the ground, like in, say, in like a Latin American country, that might be something to look into. Although I would also, and I'm glad to be on this interview, because I do want to also say that my experience with Saint Lucia in terms of like the delays that are happening there, not just there, but also for all the Caribbean countries and even for Turkey and Portugal. It kind of shows you that just because the government or these people, the agents trying to sell you their services, the lawyers, they promise you a certain timeline. That doesn't mean it's going to be that timeline.
Yeah, of course not. It never is. It's like that's just an estimated. So that's always like an estimate, right? So like I believe for the Republic of Ireland, if you're going to apply through descent at the Foreign Birth Register, it says 2 years. Some people, it takes 2 years, no problem, cool. But some other people, it takes 3 years, maybe 4 years, maybe they need to provide more evidence. You know, for my last podcast guest, one of my subscribers, Vic, it took him around 7 years to get Italian citizenship through descent, and he had a fairly strong lineage that he was able to verify. You know, it wasn't something crazy like, oh yeah, in 1863 I had a long distance relative. No, it was, I believe, from grandparents, so it should have been very easy, but still it took 7 years. Naturally COVID hit, so that might be a bit of a valid excuse as to why, but still it does take a long time. It's not something where I feel like a lot of people, when they immediately go into it, think, okay, so I'm just going to transfer 100,000 American dollars at the time to some bank account in Saint Lucia, and the next day with Amazon Prime I'll have a passport in my front door. Like that's not how it works at all. Like it's, and even I don't know too much about it. I'm just like an independent researcher, but like a lot of people have that perception, but it's totally not the truth at all. It's not at all. I wish it was. I wish it would be so idyllic. I'm sure you do as well. But the reality of the situation is where, you know, giving citizenship to a person, as much as maybe I on my videos or maybe some other people as well, we like to say, oh, it's very easy, get citizenship here. It's not as easy as a process as videos describe them to be. There is a lot of paperwork behind the scenes and everything, no matter how you're naturalizing, whether that's through investment or donation, descent, or residency or what have you, or maybe through marriage. That's another option. It always does take time. I'm curious, naturally you have the US passport and the Saint Lucian passport. Is there any other passport that you are currently looking at, or any other country where maybe you're thinking that you would either do investment route, or maybe you're married, I don't know the nationality of your wife, but if she's a foreign citizen, maybe you would do that one. Is there any other passport that you're looking at?
Not seriously at the moment. The only reason I kind of keep up with the industry is to see if there may be options for my wife that might be better in case St. Lucia takes even longer, because when that's another thing too, when the agents or the countries give you like an estimate, like that estimate can kind of blow up in your face. And also, even like IMI Daily, which basically they survey all the agents on these programs, and they say like, okay, what's your youngest application in terms of the age of the application? What's your youngest? What's your oldest? What's your average age of your application? One thing that isn't really touched upon is that data only measures how old their applications are. It actually doesn't measure, I believe, it doesn't actually measure the time from submission to when the people actually get the passports. So in the case of, like, say, St. Lucia, I think the oldest application now out there is, at least according to the third quarter IMI Daily data, is, I believe, I want to say it's 16 months, but that doesn't, so what that means is the application is 16 months old. That doesn't mean when somebody applied 16 months ago and got it now. So that application could take even longer. And in fact, when you compare the Q3 data, the third quarter data for IMI Daily, to the second quarter data, the most of the times actually expanded. So in Q2, for example, for St. Lucia, the oldest application was 13 months. And then Q3, the oldest application is 16 months. Meaning that most likely that oldest application in Q2 just got 3 months older. Nothing actually happened to that application.
Do you think, and you know, like naturally, I'm not St. Lucia's defense attorney here, but do you think that might be because, and again, no disrespect to the country, but St. Lucia is not on a level of Singapore or the United States. You know, it's a rich country, but it's not as rich of a country as Singapore, Monaco, these types of places where maybe they have more resources or maybe they have more employees, I guess, working there. Do you think that that might be a factor that goes into it, where it's still a developing country, it's an island country where resources are sort of limited?
I think so. So I keep up with this because I'm naturally very interested in why my wife's application has taken so long. So what Saint Lucian, I believe, the other Caribbean governments have said is basically probably that they are limited in terms of not necessarily maybe staff, but also the working space for the staff in terms of like desks and computers and whatnot. And they're also probably also limited. The part of the process that takes the longest for not just St. Lucia and not just the Caribbean, but for any of these programs is the due diligence part. The part where they're making sure that you're not a criminal, you're not a money launderer, etc. That's the part that takes the longest because naturally they don't want to bring these kind of peoples in, and especially with the EU and the US putting pressure on all these programs to make sure that they're not abused. That's the part that takes the longest. That being said, though, you also have to think, when somebody is giving you, 40,000, 100,000, 240,000, or in the case of like Malta, 1 million, or Austria, like, I don't know, 2 million plus, or in Turkey where some people are, giving like, tens of thousands of dollars in applications fees, you would also think that the country would take some of that 100,000, 200,000, whatever that you're giving them and hire another employee to process your application.
Yeah, you would think that, but then I guess, and again, I don't know exactly where that money goes, but if it ends up that everyone working for a certain department got a pay rise, then you sort of go, okay, this is a little bit sketchy of it. It's like when they when a country gets international aid and then it doesn't go to anywhere, but then suddenly all the government workers get pay rises. It's like, okay, like this is not a efficient or adequate use of the donation money. So that is actually something that I had not considered would actually happen with citizenship by investment programs. But and now that you say it, it is actually something that I might do some deep investigations on as to where exactly that investment goes, because I would have imagined that it would go to maybe schooling or hospitals or something in the public sector perhaps, or maybe improving their transport infrastructure. But if it doesn't go there, then maybe some questions do need to be asked. Now, I wanted to touch upon Vanuatu, because Vanuatu, I believe, is currently standing at 130,000. It's the second cheapest one in the world, and I believe the most expensive one in the region. Now, Vanuatu has a terrible reputation. I looked at their map literally last night, and it's not gotten any better in regards to how many countries they have visa-free access to. But I must admit, I do find it kind of ironic that Vanuatu is the one that got all the bad blood for it, because, yeah, okay, the European Union, the United States, they're probably not fond of citizenship by investment, but the US and the UK, they both have permanent residency by investment. They both have these types of visas available to them. So my first reaction was, okay, what gives them the right to judge another country for going one step further for a much lower price? But also, why do you think Vanuatu was the one that sort of pulled the short straw, and why wasn't it a country like Grenada or any other country in the Caribbean? Why did they all decide to target Vanuatu? Was it because it was the quickest time? Well, they can't say it was the cheapest because it wasn't the cheapest. So why do you think they did target Vanuatu so harshly?
Honestly, I think for Vanuatu, probably the straw that broke the camel's back was the fact that they were, and I believe still are, taking Russian applicants. Whereas pretty much when the whole Russia-Ukraine thing happened, the Caribbean countries pretty much stopped doing sorry, that was my phone. Stopped doing Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian applicants. But I think Vanuatu still kept processing those applications. Also, I've heard with Vanuatu, you have to check this because I don't know if it's true, but I've heard also Vanuatu, some of the people they approved like you would just be able to Google them and you would find their name on like in the news as some criminal or something. So they were really doing, as far as I was heard, a really bad job with the due diligence. Like you guys got to do like a Google search to make sure these people are criminals. Right?
Yeah, true. And Google's free, so if that's true, there's no excuse for it. They can't go, yeah, we couldn't afford the resource. Because I mean, if you're not gonna use Google, I'm pretty sure it would come up on Bing as well. So if that's true, Vanuatu, do better. But like, yeah, so that I will agree on. If they gave it out to some guy who's like got international arrest warrants everywhere, Interpol red, and you know you look up their name, they wanted in many countries, and then they turn up in Vanuatu and have the passport, cool, no problem. I can understand that argument for it. But I'm pretty sure, and again, I'm not accusing any countries by any means, but I'm pretty sure most countries around the world, if you turn up with enough money, they would also accidentally turn around at the exact moment when that person picks up their new passport. So again, I think it's a little bit hypocritical in a way. Again, not accusing any countries, but I think with enough money, anyone can get away with anything, frankly. And that's just my opinion. But also, you know, you hear a lot of stories about these wanted people who turn up in some country that has a good reputation and they suddenly have a passport. So for me, I always was a little bit not fond of the way in which they treated Vanuatu. Moving towards your thoughts on Saint Lucia, naturally, just before we go on, have you ever visited Saint Lucia before or since you naturalized?
Nope.
No. Do you have any intentions to?
That's a good question. Not. Probably not. It's probably for what it offers. I think you can go to much easierly accessible places. I've heard. I do have a friend who has been there. He said it was beautiful, and I really should check it out. But this time I don't really have an intention to. Actually, yeah, and also getting back to your previous point, that is true, and that is also something that I find hypocritical. That a lot of these countries, like the U.S., various EU countries, that don't look down upon or are applying pressure to these other countries like the Caribbean countries for having their CBI, or Vanuatu, or I'm sure Nauru will get something from the UK because they have UK visa-free access. I'm sure the UK may or may most likely doesn't like that. But yeah, the same thing is like these countries do have residency by investment programs. Even the United States has one. The UK, I believe they used to have an investor program. The UK used to have one. I mean, I know one of my friends who's Russian. I believe he has the British passport as a result of this program. Obviously, he got it, years before, all this stuff happened between Russia and Ukraine. And I believe that's also why some people even joke that you can call London Londonigrad, because there's so many, wealthy Russians who, at least at the time, used to live in London. So I do think, it is a bit hypocritical that they target these countries and not like, say, they target like Malta, but they don't target Austria. Like, why? It's just because Austria is more expensive. Like, so, and then the other thing that's funny is that the EU was the one who insisted that the Caribbean countries raise their prices, which is kind of weird because it's like, so you want this to be more exclusive, so you want people who are more likely to have gotten their money questionably to get this? Like, wait, what is the impetus for having the higher price? Is it just because, is it self-interest? Like, you just want less competition for Malta and Austria? Like, and at the same time, you want to make it easier for people to immigrate through other ways, maybe, like especially legal ways, maybe. So, although I think that's changing, but it's like, what is going on here? Like, why you got this way, but you also want it this way, kind of a thing,
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with respect to the European Union, I don't think they challenged the Caribbean community or Vanuatu because they wanted what's best for Malta or Austria, respectively, because the European Union took Malta to court, which is it was completely disgusting, frankly, and I'm very happy with the verdict that came out. But they didn't take Austria to court. Austria is it's probably definitely because it's more expensive, it's less well known. I guarantee if tomorrow Austria would become the most popular program in the world, I guarantee the European Union would have a problem with it. It's just because it sort of goes under the table. I don't believe many people have even discussed the Austrian program. In all honesty, I might do a detailed video on the program, but the issue is there aren't many resources out there that give you information on it because it is so unknown. And when you talk about European Union by investment, you would either do Malta or you would do maybe Portugal, Greece, or now Hungary, but Hungary is a little bit more bureaucratic. I do believe if you want citizenship, there is actually residency and language requirements, which if you don't speak Hungarian and you're only a native English speaker or what have you, that might cause some issues. I still maintain it's possible if you're really about it, but that might be a little bit more tough. But Austria gets a free pass for a reason, as to which I don't know why. Naturally, there is always this reputation that people who do citizenship by investment, people have multiple passports. Even I got it myself. I'm a dual citizen through birth and residency. But people who don't understand this world, they often see people who have multiple citizenships as being, quote unquote, as the English would say, dodgy, where that's really not true. Everyone has different intentions for doing it, but by raising the prices, as you mentioned, this is something I'd also considered as well. You are also incentivizing people who maybe do have more of a dodgy background than maybe some guy who got lucky on one Bitcoin purchase or one good investment. Now you really are only going to be incentivizing oligarchs who now have a residency in the United Arab Emirates, who can transfer money very easily between a Dubai bank account to a Swiss bank account to some European Union bank account. So they are sort of driving away people who maybe you're in this position. I'm not too sure. I did read on your profile the way in which you generated your wealth, but someone who maybe got lucky on an investment at the right place, right time, or maybe they inherited some good money. Like, they're going to drive those people away when I do believe they can bring value to the country, especially if they want to open a business, hire some people there, anything that would generate value to it. So I really don't understand what the big fuss is about. I think they're just trying to, in my opinion personally, I think it's just a play of power, in honesty, where they go, yeah, we can do whatever we want, and if you don't like it, screw you. So I'm really happy with the verdict that came out with Malta. I think that's a good thing. It's not a program that I'm too interested in personally currently, but it's one where Malta's a good country. They should have the right to do what they want with their immigration, and even though they are European Union, the European Union shouldn't tell them who they can and can't accept. That's for Malta to decide. So for me, that's always been like my drawing point. I like European Union. I like the concept of free movement. You can go to different places with an EU passport. That's all great. But when they try and become too bureaucratic, that's where my loyalty for that whole concept ends. Especially, I'm not too fond of their new ETIAS program or the UK's new program. I think the more electronic visas, the worse situation, to be honest, because you can't quickly bounce from one country to another, which for me is a little bit concerning. Not because I have anything to hide, because what if they increase the time waiting where, let's say in 2 years you have to apply a month in advance. Okay, well, if you have to leave quickly for whatever reason, that's not going to be possible anymore if you don't have another passport. Now, you said that since 2015, 2016, you've been traveling around the world a lot. So let's list off some countries first as a starting point. So what countries have you mainly been living in from that time period?
Let's see. From about 2015 to 2020, I lived in Poland. And then after that, I moved around a bit. I lived in Belgrade, Serbia for 6 months. And then in the second half of 2021 until about about 2020, September 2023, that's when I lived in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, and we're in Central Asia. Very unique part of the world. That's where I met my wife. She's not from there, but that's where I met her. She was a university student at the time. So that's basically my travel experience.
Oh wow! So it's I'd imagine Poland. I believe you've made some comments in a group that we're in about Poland, Belgrade, I believe as well. But I did not anticipate Kyrgyzstan. So let's go through with Poland first. So what made you first go to Europe, Poland and Serbia?
I basically went there. Previously, I'd been working for a major U.S. airline, so was kind of exposed to travel, but the thing is, obviously, you have a 9 to 5 office job, so you can't. You're only visiting all these places that you have the leisure to go to. You're not actually living in them. So once my investments in the stock market got to a certain level where I could live off them, I decided, hey, I'm going to go live in. I want to go experience living abroad. So it's like, let's check out Poland. It has a. When I visited there, I was like, it has like a kind of European standard of living, but at a much lower price. From there, I can kind of explore the rest of the EU. So that was the impetus for Poland.
Oh, okay, awesome. Because that is very true what you said, where it's a very developed country. I mean, just look at the skyline of their major cities, right? Like it's not 1989 anymore. They've developed very well, very fast. I've personally never been to Poland, but everyone who has gone says that it's a beautiful country and it's a very safe country as well. Same principle with Hungary, Slovakia, Slovenia. Croatia, in my opinion, is a little bit dodgy, but the rest are very safe, very good. But then again, I haven't been to the tourist areas of Croatia. I was in the capital city. But these places are very safe. I'd maintain Austria as well, but for me, the old Iron Curtain countries and Portugal are the safest in Europe currently. With also Cyprus, if you consider that Europe as well. And then what made you go to Serbia from Poland?
Yeah, so when the pandemic happened, I had to leave Poland, and I just came back to the U.S. because I mean, at the time when the pandemic broke out, like nobody knew what was going to happen, and my visa was about to run out, so I was just like, okay, well, I don't want to be illegal, so went back to the U.S. And then as the pandemic kind of dragged on, Serbia was one of the countries that was open at the time. So I was like, okay, I'll go there and wait it out until I can go back to Poland. So that's how I ended up spending 6 months in Belgrade. And actually, at the time, I kind of got frustrated at waiting for Poland to open up. So that's when I ended up going to Kyrgyzstan, which was also open at the time during the pandemic. Ironically, Poland opened up like just as I left Belgrade, but what can you do? Government bureaucracy, right?
Yeah, but you met your wife in Kyrgyzstan, so it was kind of, if you believe it meant to be, it was meant to be there. Because had you have gone to Poland, you probably wouldn't have met her. And I believe American citizens, and again, I don't know at the time, but I believe now, and I can't imagine it would have changed, but American citizens have visa-free access to Serbia 90 days every 180 days. So how were you able to stay in Serbia for 6 months, double the time?
Right. So at least at the time, the rule, I believe, was actually 90 days, not 90 out of 180. So all you had to do was I just went to Bosnia for across the border for I think we went there and back, and then they just let me back into Serbia. So at the time, it wasn't any trouble doing basically what you would call border runs. I think now they've tightened up on that restriction though, but at the time it wasn't an issue, especially when you come in with a passport like a U.S. passport. They don't figure that you're gonna be in Serbia to work illegally.
Yeah, right. No, that is true, because they probably go, okay, like this very developed Western country, like maybe this guy has like you actually do, maybe you have some stocks to your name or what have you. So yeah, I probably would. I don't think they would ever imagine that, frankly, for any Western parts. But I believe Georgia, the Republic of Georgia, has the same policy where you can go in, you can stay there for a year, then you can just hop over to Armenia or Turkey, go back, and then the year restarts, which is actually quite a good strategy. But the problem is, if you don't have a visa, how long do you want to maintain that lifestyle where you don't have a residency anywhere, you're just sort of living as a tourist, which actually might sound like a good idea, but then if you want to stay there long term, there's always a risk of getting deported or what have you, so that might raise some issues. But I do believe Georgia has a same policy. And then from Belgrade, Serbia, you went to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. So What made you? You said that Kyrgyzstan was the only country that was open. Now, I'll be honest, right? If I'm in Serbia and I'm thinking, okay, maybe I want to go to another country that's open, and I see Kyrgyzstan is the only country that's open. I don't know if I would book my flight to Kyrgyzstan, frankly. So, what made you actually go to Kyrgyzstan of all places, other than it being open?
Yeah, so I mean, there were other countries open at the time. What made me go to Kyrgyzstan, honestly, is my mom had actually watched a documentary about Central Asia on Netflix, and so she said, "Oh, you should check it out." I like to ski, and apparently they've got. She said, "Yeah, they've got good skiing." So I was like, "Hey, yeah, I'll go check it out." Good skiing. Turns out very low cost of living. Um, Kyrgyzstan was the only country during the pandemic that was actually open to tourists at the time. So I didn't, in terms of Central Asia, I didn't have a choice between the other countries or Kyrgyzstan. So that's where I ended up.
Oh, cool. But yeah, you're right. Kyrgyzstan does have very nice scenery. That's one thing that I always knew about it. That I don't know if they call it this or if this is just something that I heard or I don't know. But apparently it's known as the Switzerland of Central Asia, where it really does have those beautiful mountains. It's true, they really do. They really got lucky. It's unfortunate that they're landlocked because they could do with a coastline, but they're very lucky nature-wise, I believe, where it is a very beautiful country. But you said that they have a low cost of living. Well, certainly for a Westerner such as yourself, not sure if the locals would agree with that. But if you're using American dollars, you could probably get by very fast. So let's just talk briefly about the numbers here. Preferably in US dollars, not from each local currency. So, out of those three countries, Poland, Serbia, and Kyrgyzstan, I'd imagine Kyrgyzstan was the cheapest country. But what's the main difference that we're talking about between the cost of living for you in Poland and Serbia compared to Kyrgyzstan?
So, I would say it's not really a lot different. I would say, like although the thing is with Poland, I believe ever since I've been gone, I haven't been back to Poland since 2020. I believe, especially in Warsaw, the costs have gone up as more people have moved in. I think now in Poland, you would probably, in order to live an okay lifestyle as a single man in Poland, you would probably want to have a budget of about at least $2,500 a month, maybe more, depending on if you want to have like a city center apartment in Warsaw or Krakow. Serbia, at least at the time, was relatively cheap. It might have, or Belgrade, I should say, might have gone up. I would say there. You probably want at least as a single guy, probably 2,000 a month. And then in Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, I would say probably 2,000. Honestly, though, I think probably in all of these three destinations, you would probably want a budget of at least 2,500 a month, maybe 3,000. Like that's enough to get you by decently. You're not going to be like really balling or anything like that at that price level.
Yeah, right. But like for Kyrgyzstan, especially, because I kind of have an idea for Poland and Serbia, but Kyrgyzstan not really. So let's say let's say you have at your disposal 2,500 American a month, or maybe that's what you budgeted beforehand. What have you? What type of lifestyle are you living in Kyrgyzstan with 2,500 American a month? Are you living in a penthouse? Are you living in a studio apartment? What do the bills look like exactly?
Right. So I would think in Bishkek, if you want a city center nice apartment, it's gonna be probably 750 to 1,250 per month. And then what Bishkek really does have is like all the other things are cheaper, like your groceries, eating out. I remember actually I went to a nice sit-down restaurant with me and two of my other buddies, so three people. We had main entree, we had a dessert. We split a big thing of like a container of tea. I think the total cost for all three of us was about $12. So it basically worked out to $4 a person. And I remember going to an Indian buffet restaurant in the city center of Bishkek. I believe that was about $3 for all you can eat Indian food.
Oh wow! So that's quite cheap. Although in all honesty, that is what I would have anticipated for Kyrgyzstan. In fact, the prices for like accommodation has actually surprised me. I wouldn't have thought it would be that expensive. That's some pretty good. Like in some states in America, if you want a good apartment in the city centre, that's the prices that you're looking at. So I would have imagined it would be much cheaper for central Bishkek in Kyrgyzstan, but apparently not. And what's the culture like in Kyrgyzstan? I'm not too sure where it stands on indexes. Frankly, I'm not too interested in that. But like, are you living a free life in Kyrgyzstan? How safe is Kyrgyzstan? Do you have to worry about getting mugged, robbed, or what kind of society is it like out there?
Yeah. So I think comparing it to the U.S., like in the U.S., to get a studio apartment now, you're looking at least in a normal U.S. city, you're looking at least $1,000 a month for a studio, like an old studio. And depending on which city you're in, that studio might be $1,500 a month, all the way to $2,000 probably, especially if you're in like, say, New York or San Francisco, maybe even more. So the U.S. Rents have definitely gone up. So you always have to keep things kind of, relative. As for the lifestyle in Kyrgyzstan, it's quite safe, at least in my opinion. When you walk around at night, you'll see you'll see women by themselves walking around at night, so it's quite safe for them as well. Let's see. The locals are, I would say, kind of. Obviously, you're not going to get the kind of, overly cheery American customer service outside of the U.S. I think the service levels in Bishkek were pretty good actually. I would say on par with like a Poland or a Serbia. There's still obviously some remnants of the communist times, but that has obviously a lot of that has rapidly changed as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union. What else can I say about the lifestyle in Kyrgyzstan? Yeah, it's pretty low crime, low cost of living. Some of the brands that you shop may not be there, which might be a good thing or a bad thing. Like KFC is everywhere in Bishkek, but McDonald's isn't. Some of the clothing brands, like De Facto, which is a Turkish brand, is there, but like a Zara or something, they're not there.
Well, in all honesty, and this is something that I noticed in the US, and I'm not like the biggest fast food advocate of all time or anything, but certainly in most European countries, at least, definitely in England, KFC is better than McDonald's. So if Kyrgyzstan has that leverage, and that's good, although it's kind of weird. There's KFCs everywhere. I wouldn't have anticipated there would be any in Kyrgyzstan beforehand, but when I found out that they were riddled with them in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, I was like, okay, Colonel Sanders really has gone global in a sense. Like, who thinks about opening a branch in Mongolia? Like, I've never thought about it. Like, so that's kind of unbelievable that they have a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Mongolia. So now I'm not surprised at all that they have it in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. In all honesty, now speaking with some of my family members, we're quite big on travel. I've been my whole life pretty much. And we really want to visit Uzbekistan. But I was saying to them, okay, if we go to Uzbekistan, we go to Tashkent, no problem. In Samarkand, we'll have a great time. But then we might as well also visit Kyrgyzstan as well, because we want nicer scenery. And with all due respect to Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, we're not getting our visas approved, no way in hell. But like, so I feel like a lot of people still overlook these countries, but I mean, like you said, if they're on par customer service level with Poland and Serbia, which I would imagine to be very much so satisfactory and adequate, like I remember I was in Hungary in the east, near the Slovakian border, about 5-10 minutes away from the Slovakian border. This is a part of Hungary that no tourists go to, and you stand out like a sore thumb, even if you're a tourist. Now I speak the language, so but even with me, they came up to me and said, "You're not from here. You grew up abroad," kind of thing. But even there, you go to some major chains, some major American chains specifically. The customer service is very evident that they were trained by the Americans, not by the locals, where you do see that. So maybe that might be also a thing in Kyrgyzstan, where maybe they're trained by Americans, or maybe they're trained by some larger corporation where they put more of an emphasis on customer service. Now, in Kyrgyzstan, how long were you in Kyrgyzstan for? Were you just there as a tourist for like 2 weeks? How long were you there?
No, I lived there. I actually bought an apartment there. So I was there from the second half of 2021 to September 2023. So about 2 years.
Oh, so did you apply for Saint Kitts citizenship? Saint Lucia citizenship from Kyrgyzstan?
Yes, I did it in Kyrgyzstan.
Oh, well, that must. I mean, I don't know. That might be an ignorant question, but did that increase some bureaucracy on your end by applying from Kyrgyzstan, not from America?
I think. Did it? Let's see. My application I applied in July 22 and I got the passport in January 2023. Did it increase any of the bureaucracy? Well, it only took them at the time 3 months for them to do the due diligence on me, and then it took another 3 months for them to get me the passport. So I think, and at the time, I believe that was kind of the standard timeline, was about 6 months. I think, Raphael, I think he got his St. Kitts in about the same timeline, around the same time or maybe earlier. So I guess it didn't really affect my application.
And did you get your passport delivered to you in Kyrgyzstan, or did you have to go to some foreign? Did you have to go to an embassy, or did it just go straight to your door?
Yeah, they just, I believe they sent it by, it was either FedEx or DHL. I can't remember which.
Oh, awesome! So that must be the only time where a Saint Lucian passport has ever touched Kyrgyz soil in human history. I can't imagine that there would be many people in your situation doing that. So if I were you, I'd contact Guinness about that and maybe see if you can get a record for that or something. Because that's actually very, very cool. And while you're in Kyrgyzstan, naturally a part of diversification, we talk about income diversification, passport diversification. I'm quite bullish on language diversification as well. I think it's quite good for your brain. I've had some conversations with linguists where they say that the more language, that if someone who speaks multiple languages, they're less likely to get dementia as they get older because they're constantly thinking and translating in their head. So let's talk about languages for a moment here. Just before we go into Kyrgyzstan specifically, do you speak any other language beyond English?
At a basic level, like I speak French, Polish, and then also some Russian. So it's enough to like kind of make idle chit chat with a taxi driver, essentially, which is basically most of my experience with these languages, except for French. French I studied in high school. But yeah, so I would say in terms of getting around in Kyrgyzstan with language, you don't have to speak Russian, but it does help. And I think that's just the way the world is now. Like if you can go to a lot of places in the world now and not speak the local language, just by kind of using translation apps or by using various like online services or whatnot, you can kind of get by. But there are instances where knowing the local language does help. So, I would advise people to learn some of the basic language if you're going to end up living abroad.
Well, actually, that ties on perfectly to my next point, where it's like, while you were living in Kyrgyzstan, did you pick up on any Kyrgyz slang or phrases, or were you able to start, let's say you're walking down the street somewhere in Bishkek and there's signs everywhere in Kyrgyz, were you able to start translating that or understanding what these signs meant?
So Central Asia is an interesting story because depending on where you go, but Central Asia for a long time was under the Soviet Union. So um, a lot of the countries like you can get by with Russian rather than the local language. Um, in Kyrgyzstan specifically, in Bishkek, like almost everybody knows Russian and Kyrgyz. And so Kyrgyz is a language is a all of the Central Asian languages except for Tajik are Turkic languages. So which means they're a lot like Turkish. Tajik is more like Persian. Um, but at least in the capital cities, people will speak Russian. In the countrysides, they'll speak their local language and less of Russian. And and so that also translates to when you look at the advertisements or whatnot, they'll often be dual language advertisements. They'll be in Russian and the local language. Um, some of the countries, like I've been to Uzbekistan, I've been to Kazakhstan. Um, those, and I haven't been to Turkmenistan, obviously. I haven't been to Tajikistan, but some of these other countries are kind of emphasizing their local language more. I remember in Uzbekistan, it was harder to find Russian on the signage. In Kazakhstan, Russian was a little bit more prevalent. Like in Uzbekistan, you could kind of see they were really trying to emphasize their local language. Although I think Russian, you could still use
Right.
it there.
Yeah, that's true. You actually start seeing that with a lot more places around, or just around the world in general. Many places are emphasizing their local languages or local dialects. An example that would go to the British Isles was when I went to Ireland in Dublin Airport. The signs are in English and in Irish everywhere. You go to If you are going to travel to the UK, you go to a place like Wales. Their dual language in English and Welsh. Hell, if you go to Hungary, it'll take it even a step further, where it'll be in Hungarian, but it'll be in the old runic script before they adopted the Latin script. So this emphasis I'm really starting to notice it as well, where it's like, okay, a lot of these countries, I'd imagine maybe in some Latin American regions, you might have, if they have any scriptures, they might have it written in some of their pre-colonial languages as well, which I actually maintain is a good thing. I don't see any problem with that at all. I think anyone who has an argument against that, they don't really have any validity to it. But the reason why I ask is because Kyrgyzstan seems to be a country where, getting citizenship, I don't believe they allow dual nationality, and I also don't believe is it possible to get Kyrgyz citizenship, and is there any incentive to do it realistically?
Actually, we actually looked into this for my wife. Um, I believe, yeah, I believe Kyrgyzstan does actually allow dual citizenship, and the requirements, at least on paper. Now, I want to emphasize on paper because we didn't actually go through with this. The requirements, as I remember them, you have to live in Kyrgyzstan for 5 years. Um, you have to speak either Kyrgyz or Russian at a communicable level. So you don't have to be fluent, but you can't just be like, me, which is a taxi, making idle chit chat with taxi driver level. Like you have to actually be able to communicate intelligently in Russian or Kyrgyz. Um, and then you have to pass obviously you have to pass like the criminal background check. Um, what else? Yeah, I think now you have to provide some evidence that you either are employed or self-sufficient, and I think you can actually get Kyrgyz citizenship that way. My wife didn't qualify because she was shy of the 5 years because she was a student there. Would you want to get it? Compared to her previous passport, certainly her previous passport is one of the worst in the world. But in terms of visa free, the strength of the Kyrgyz passport, I believe it's about on the same level as I want to say either India or Pakistan in terms of access. So not particularly strong, but if you're coming from one of the world's worst passports, Um, that's it's still better than nothing essentially. But I don't see a lot of people going out of their way to get, especially with having to be residing in Kyrgyzstan for 5 years. Although I think they did have some sort of citizenship by exception or investment program. I think a lot of Russians went through that or they went through the resident. They might have had a informal residency program. A lot of Russians went through after the Russia-Ukraine thing popped off. Um, so in terms of the passport, yeah, it has some uses for certain people, but for most people, it's not going to be really that interesting.
Would it be fair to classify the Kyrgyz passport as kind of like a Plan D, Plan E level of a passport, where it's not a Plan B level, but there's if you are really about diversification to the maximum and you're willing to put in the residency or maybe the money if they have some sort of exception program, then it would be worth it at a Plan D level.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, it's about like, yeah, I can't. Yeah, I don't. The problem with saying something like that though is that I think there are probably better like Plan D or Plan E type things. Like most likely like say like a Nauru is probably a better like Plan D, just simply because assuming the program um, doesn't run into any hiccups and it kind of goes as planned. Like that's a program where you can just kind of uh, give them the money, and then you don't have to spend like 5 years in the country or anything like that. Because yeah, it's the thing with Kyrgyzstan, right? Is like, put it this way: if you don't have the money to invest to do something like a Nauru, most likely you don't have the money to spend 5 years in Kyrgyzstan. Most likely.
So you said that your wife has one of the worst passports in the world. Do you think that goes into why it's been a little bit more difficult for your wife to get Saint Lucia as well, because she doesn't have that American passport?
Yeah, that was initially what I thought, and then actually when I posted that on the forums, someone more knowledgeable in general, or at least somebody that I respected, said actually no, it doesn't. The nationality doesn't really matter, and it actually turns out because that it's not really that strong of a factor actually, and I've got a couple of bit of data points to kind of show that. Like one American guy that I'm in contact with who's been waiting more than a year for St. Lucia, he's still waiting. Meanwhile, I just heard a Lebanese guy just got approved like almost a year to date. To a year to the point, actually. Sorry. So, in terms of the nationality affecting it, it's not really clear actually that it's the primary factor in her delay. That being said, you would also think that with the spousal application, I'm the one kind of taking the risk, marrying her, that it would speed up the process, and at least I believe that was what was promised when when we submitted the application. So in fact, her nationality could be affecting that. It could be the reason why her spousal application is taking longer. I'm not sure how long it would be if she had filed for the application, as a single applicant. How long it would take. And I guess also another thing to clarify, like a lot of these people, including my wife, when they applied for their Saint Lucia passport, like, I mean, you can still actually go on the Saint Lucia website, the citizenship website, and I think they still, like on their website, which is horribly out of date, they still promise a processing time of 90 days, which I don't know if they've ever actually fulfilled that. They even didn't fulfill it for me as an American back before the whole, EU controversy and whatnot.
out of curiosity, because I had a conversation with a previous podcast guest of mine for a different podcast that I run. She's a Hungarian citizen, so much stronger passport than your wife's nationality, but still it has a little bit of a bad reputation with the United States, certainly currently, for reasons I can't think of any valid justification for. But they don't have the best reputation in Europe. I can't understand why, but that's whatever. So, and she married an American citizen, moved to America, and even me knowing what it's like to move to America, applying for visas, what has been your experience like moving to America? Naturally, you're an American citizen, you can just turn up to the passport, no problem. But with your wife moving there, applying for residency or the marriage green card or what have you with your wife, who comes from a country that doesn't have a good passport, certainly not anymore. It might have been a little bit better a couple of years ago, but now is probably one of the worst in the world, like you said. How has that process been like?
Yeah. So the way she was able to come to the U.S. is actually kind of a stroke of luck. Like before things happened in her country, the university she was going to in Bishkek happened to be strongly affiliated with an American university. So when things kind of became worse in her country, that American university was able to pull some strings to get her out of that country and back into Kyrgyzstan. And then from there, they started the process to get her to the U.S. And that process took her actually almost 2 years, almost exactly, to get her to the U.S. So the important thing is she didn't come through me through marriage. She actually came through by herself, and again, kind of through luck, essentially, that she happened to attend this university as an undergraduate, and then she did the graduate program in Kyrgyzstan. That kind of helped her get to the U.S. So, and as for our current situation, we've been kind of waiting on Saint Lucia before kind of moving forward with anything else in the U.S. We'll probably, if Saint Lucia doesn't get back to us by, let's say, January, we'll probably look to start the green card process for her here in the U.S.
Right, yeah, that's so it's stroke of luck then that Kyrgyz University had strong connections with a American campus as well. It's a stroke of luck then, and I hope that you're able to get her both as well, the American and the Saint Lucian. Is it possible to renounce citizenship in her country of origin?
I believe so, yes. Would we do it? I think, honestly, we would probably only do that if it presented some obstacles for her going forward. The reason I say that is because my parents are from Myanmar, which is a country that, while not having one of the worst passports, is obviously not one of the greatest either. When they became U.S. citizens, they renounced their Myanmar citizenship, but in retrospect, that wasn't necessary because it wasn't really a liability. It turned out it wouldn't have been a liability for them because they have relatives who went to who didn't renounce, and it turned out not to be a liability for them. So, yeah. Long story short, like really the only reason to renounce a citizenship is if it is a liability, like kind of a more immediate liability for you, or you see that it in that way. Like in the case of certain people, like they renounce their U.S. citizenship for like tax or political reasons, like But in terms of um, even if you have like a really bad passport, like it's only when it becomes a liability for you that you would want to renounce it. Um, which we to be fair though, we don't know if it's a liability for her yet. Like we haven't gone that next step where it's like she has the alternative passport, and then we go and do something like say like, uh, you know, apply for residency in Europe, let's say, and then they see that, or sorry,
I'll beep it. Don't worry.
when they'll see the worst passport, and then it'll kind of show like, okay, it's a liability. Then it's like, okay, yeah, we have to get rid of that.
Yeah. So unless it's like a direct thing, so I'd also imagine with the current interim government running the country, citizenship renunciation probably isn't the priority. And it's like how stable is communication from the US with that country, since there are no established diplomatic relations, and just with all that, it might make it a little bit more difficult. So I do agree. It's like if it's not going to cause any harm, if you're maybe applying for, and as an American, you wouldn't necessarily, apart from when they actually introduce this ETIAS crap. But maybe then if that causes issues, fair enough. But I think that's very good how you said it. Where if it doesn't raise an immediate problem, then there's no real point. And also, well, if the country changes in 30 years to something better, then okay, then you've got that country open to you as well. If it changes into something better with an incentive to go there, maybe if there's a change in who's running it or what have you. Still maintaining vagueness on the country. Are you what language do you and your wife communicate in? Are you studying the language of her country of origin? Is she studying English? What languages do you communicate in?
Yeah, we communicate in English. So she already knew English before I met her. She was studying at a university that was American affiliated, so all the coursework was in English. So yeah. Am I studying her language? No. Most likely, she'll probably pass the language on to our kids, assuming we have them. But no plans for me to learn her language.
Okay, cool. But it's so you both communicate in English. So I was curious if it would have been Russian or English if you'd met in Kyrgyzstan. It might have been one of the two. But if you're only able to converse on a taxi driver level, I don't know how you would have been able to convince her to marry you. If you could only converse on a taxi driver level, that would have been seriously impressive. I would have needed to get some tips from you then, and maybe go to Kyrgyzstan myself to try and meet the right one in a basic conversational level. But then English, okay, fair enough, cool. That does make sense. What are your plans? And naturally, I appreciate that there's this whole quote: "Don't tell people your plans." So please be as discreet or as on the level as you'd like. But what are your plans for the future? Are you planning to live abroad again with your wife now? Are you planning, and if so, what countries are you looking at? Where are you looking to go if you're looking to go anywhere?
Yeah. So our intent was to, when she got the Saint Lucia passport, would be to at least travel abroad, to kind of compare and contrast the different countries to see where we wanted to start a family. But now that Saint Lucia is taking so long, that obviously traveling abroad is obviously not an option, having one of the worst passports in the world. So assuming nothing happens by January, we will probably start her U.S. green card process and probably start a family here in the U.S. And then probably kind of take it from there to see what our next steps will be. So yeah, those are my plans. And what I would say for other people too is that, the Saint Lucia example kind of provides an example not just for other people interested in Saint Lucia or even the Caribbean, but other programs in general. Like, again, like you can't emphasize it enough. Like, just because let's say like Argentina, like, or some lawyer says like, oh, it'll only take you 2 years to get the Argentine passport when you land, like it could not. They might not even be lying to you. That literally could be the truth at the time. But then as you wait, a year and a few months go by, like all of a sudden things could change with the program, where all of a sudden that timeline expands, out of the control of anybody.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's like, and again, I guess that's a valid argument to say that I do this as well, because I often praise, I think it is one of the best passports in the world, the Irish passport. But is it a good option for everyone? Definitely not. If you can't get it through descent and you don't like a rainy country, are you going to be able to last 5 years in the Republic of Ireland, a very cold, rainy country with no Mediterranean lifestyle, let's put it that way, or no nice, warm, tropical climate? So it doesn't work. It's a very good passport, but it doesn't work for everyone. And like, I always love it when people, you always see this with Southeast Asia and the Spanish-speaking American world, or anything south of Mexico, where people say, oh yeah, move to Nicaragua for the best life in the world. Now, I'm sure that you can live a good life in Nicaragua, but they never say they never caveat it with the cons. They always say, you can buy this villa in this Latin American country for $5,000 American dollars and you can live like a king. What they don't tell you is it's controlled by the gangs. So, that's always like the caveat where they never raise that issue. And like, I heard with Argentina that the 2 years is valid. The 2 years is still a thing. But if you're from a country that they don't see as better than theirs, then maybe they'll say, sorry, we have a backlog, apply in 2 years' time. Whereas if you come from a country that they deem as on a par or more respectable than theirs, then they'll probably be more favourable to give it to you. So that's always something that you always have to be aware of as well. It's like, and it's unfortunate, but it does depend upon where you come from as well, where if they don't respect your country, are they going to be as nice and diplomatic to you? Probably not. No, it's the same principle as like, everyone says it's much easier for a British person to apply for a US green card than a Romanian, because the American government respects the British passport more than the Romanian passport, and just the two countries in general, I think, have a closer relationship. So that is always something that not a lot of people talk about, where it's like, okay, where are you coming from? Who are you? And like, what does the country that you're trying to move to or naturalize in think about your country of origin? Because it's unfortunate, but it does play a pretty large factor into the final decision making. I'm curious, if you, just as a final sort of a fun talking point, if you had to, let's ignore all bureaucracy, all financial costs, everything. If you were able to curate your own passport portfolio, no matter what, let's say I'm a genie and I can give it to you just like that, what passports would you curate for yourself?
Well, probably the Singaporean passport is would probably definitely be in the portfolio, because it's a very, obviously, like one of the strongest passports, but it's also a very neutral passport. Like, if you go, you can go to the US with the Singaporean passport, or you can also go to China or Russia with this passport. I think you can go to Russia. I know you can go to China.
I don't think you can with Singapore anymore. There is one country where you can, but there is one passport with which you can go to both of those, but I don't think Singapore. It might be Serbia. Serbia, definitely, but I think there's another one. But I'm not.
I don't think you can go to the US with Serbia.
No, you can't go to US with Serbia. Well, I mean, this passport no one really wants anymore, but you technically could with the Israeli passport, but with the current situation, I don't see anyone getting that anytime soon, so...
Yeah, you would, yeah. So yeah, Singapore, in general, it's kind of regarded as a neutral country. Like, so even if you have to apply for a Russian visa, like you're gonna be treated, I think, probably better than, say, like an American in this current time. So that probably Singapore. The only problem with Singapore is at least on paper, I believe they don't allow dual nationality. Although the enforcement of that is, and honestly, a lot of dual nationality restrictions. The big question is, like, how does the country actually enforce that? Because I know, like, I believe one of the reasons my parents actually renounced their Myanmar citizenship is because, like a lot of Asian countries, Myanmar doesn't allow dual citizenship, but actually they have relatives who still kept it. So I think that could be the case with Singapore. Although, then you also get in the question of, do you want to, technically be running afoul of the laws? So that does put a hamper on Singapore. What other passports would I want in this situation? Chilean is actually pretty good too. You do get access to the U.S. I believe you have access to Schengen. It's kind of like a lot of Latin American countries, probably regarded as neutral in the grand geopolitical scheme. So if you go to China or Russia, as well as the U.S. or EU, it's not going to really raise a flag. It's like, oh, you're an enemy of our country, kind of a thing, or you're from an enemy country or unfriendly country. So Chilean would probably be pretty good. So anything else? Probably one of the more neutral EU. Probably Swiss would probably be another passport in that portfolio. Mostly, probably just to let your children have access to the lower cost EU education. I believe as a foreigner you can still access that, but I think I think you have to pay more. I'm not certain about that, but I believe as an EU citizen you probably get preferential or lower cost treatment for those universities for your children. So I think those would be the three. Probably Chilean, Swiss. Yeah. Or maybe instead of Singaporean, maybe you could do UAE because I think they allow it, do nationality.
They do now, yeah. They only just allowed it like 3 years ago, but they do now, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a.
So I think those would be three really strong
Yeah,
passports to have.
that's a solid combination. For mine, I would personally, I mean, and this I'll do the same as you, where I'll clear whatever I currently have. So, I would definitely take the Irish one, because again, that's one where you have good access all over the world, and you actually have so many benefits with it. It's the only European Union passport where you can live in the UK as well. I'm pretty sure you have a working holiday agreement with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. I don't know how true this is, but a subscriber did tell me that apparently Ireland has an agreement with the US where you go through customs on Irish soil, so that when you land in the US, it's easier to enter the US. But I don't know how true that is if you're an Irish citizen.
I believe that's true.
Okay, awesome. So that's like a whole other benefit. I would take the Irish passport. I would. Well, for me, Australia and New Zealand are both a little bit concerning, because what if they introduce citizenship-based taxation? They both have free movement with each other, so I would do one or the other. I don't know which one is less likely to introduce more bureaucracy. Neither country allowed their own citizens in during COVID, so that is something that is quite something that you have to consider. But I would probably do one of them. Maybe New Zealand, because I feel like it's less bureaucratic than Australia. So Ireland, New Zealand. I would do Panama, even though Panama's a weird country where they don't allow dual nationality unless you are a natural born citizen. So I'd have to figure out something there, maybe do some time travel or something so I can be born in Panama. And I would not take their passport, although I did have a guy who found a loophole with maintaining their citizenship, even though they don't allow dual nationality. But I would take Japanese permanent residency. That's like a lane that I would definitely go down. It's like Japanese PR 100%, and maybe maybe some European golden visa with the Irish passport. I'd probably do, but those for me are like the top ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, for me, I might switch out my Swiss for Irish. Yeah, because you do get a little bit more with Irish than the Swiss, I think.
Yeah, I think you do, and I think there's less hassle with Switzerland. You have some issues with Switzerland personally. I don't know how true this is, but I have heard on the grapevine a lot that Americans struggle to open bank accounts in Switzerland because of the global taxation stuff. So that might also be an issue. I don't believe Ireland has that problem. Ireland has some other problems as well, where I think if you are out of the country for more than 7 years, is there a risk of you losing your passport? No, but apparently you do have to let them know that you want to keep your citizenship, and like, so that might be a thing. Although a lot of Irish people have commented under my video saying that they don't really enforce that. So, but again, that's just another little bit of a con, in my opinion. Not the end of the world, but it's something that one should be aware of if they're looking at the Republic of Ireland. Japan has one of the best permanent residency programs in the world, where if you get PR, you only have to enter the country once every 5 years. So it's not once every year. Once every 5 years is perfect. I think that's very easy to maintain. I wouldn't do citizenship because they don't really allow dual nationality, and I feel like Japan would be a country that would enforce that policy, where they would ask for verification before you can actually get a passport, Japanese passport. So I'd rather do permanent residency. And you know, a lot of people say Uruguay or Paraguay. I think Uruguay doesn't. They have a weird policy where they have two different passports for natural born citizens and naturalized citizens, where you're a Uruguayan. It's kind of like, I believe, the agreement with American Samoa, where you're a US person or what have you, but you're not a US citizen. So I feel like that's kind of I'm pretty sure that's the same policy with Uruguay, which I'm not too fond of, but those for me would definitely be. Before we wrap up, because this is a lane that I didn't ask you about, are there any permanent residencies that you're kind of bullish on, but you wouldn't want to get citizenship?
Maybe the Mexican one. As far as I understand, the Mexican permanent residency is truly permanent. I don't think you even have to go back to keep it. Whereas the Mexican citizenship, as far as I've heard, you have to go back every 5 years to keep it, which I'm not sure how those two things can be true, because why would the permanent residency be more permanent than the citizenship? But so the Mexican permanent residency, and I think a lot of people are doing that. It's relatively easy to get. Any other PRs? Any other permanent residency programs I'm thinking of? Really not at the time, mostly because I haven't really decided where I want to spend most of my life, because like, in order to really bother with permanent residency, like, in most cases, it's enough of a hassle that you kind of have to envision it as a place where you're going to spend a significant amount of time every year. Whereas, like, if you just want to go visit there, you might as well just have the tourist visa-free access. Yeah. So I haven't really looked at permanent residencies other than, say, Mexico, just because that's one of the ones that actually is permanent without much, if any, upkeep.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Mexico is a country that I didn't think about. Mexico would be good. Yeah, for permanent residency, I'm not too sure if that 5 year thing for citizenship is true, because again, that I'm with you on that, where that doesn't make sense, where they treat permanent residents better than they do citizens. Like that to me doesn't really make sense if that is true. Like that's a very backwards policy if it's true, which maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's actually a very good combination. Well, it's a good combination that you have currently, but I always like to curate my own little list of, okay, if I could have any passports in the world, which one would I do? Would I take Emirates? I don't know if I would take Emirates. I get that it's one of the strongest passports. I'm actually very baffled that Qatar got American VWP before the Emirates, because Qatar isn't that strong, where with the Emirates you would have had that global access, but I don't know why that is, but I think Emirates will be next.
Probably geopolitical.
Yeah, but then surely Saudi would have got it first, because Saudi is a closer ally to the US. So I don't know. For me, I'm baffled that it's Qatar. I think either Saudi or Emirates will be next, and then maybe Kuwait, but we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully you guys have listened to the end of this. If you haven't, you are not yet subscribed, I would recommend that you subscribe to this channel, where hopefully you can find value in all of my videos, but this episode definitely provided you with value, because it provided me with value, and frankly, if I think it's valuable, it's definitely valuable to you as well. Ray, thank you so much for joining me. I had an absolute blast talking with you. I'd love to continue the conversation, perhaps when your wife maybe get Saint Lucian citizenship or maybe the American green card, to do an update as to how you're doing in your personal diversification portfolio. And thank you for coming on. If you have any websites that you'd like me to link, or maybe your LinkedIn or what have you, I'll be happy to do that in the description if you want to check out. If you want to check out and learn more about Ray. But again, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.